This one person said that she always ends with a Post-it at the end of her day that she's going to attach to her computer, and the Post-it tells her where to start the next day, because morning self wants to look at the email, and maybe there's a link to Facebook, and so you go over there, and then you go to LinkedIn, and you da-da-da-da-da. But nighttime self knows that what morning self really wants to do is that. And so she'd write this Post-it, stick it up on her computer, and then in the morning, the directive for the next day would be there.
Welcome to Beyond the Thesis with Papa PhD, your weekly inspiration for post-PhD career development. With me, David Mendez.
What we found is the things that these experienced gig workers did, the ones that described their identity as pretty firm, they knew who they were and they lived it, and they described their working life as more vital. So they created what they needed for themselves to contain the anxieties that came from working in this style. So they did 4 things. They created 4 connections. So I'll describe one and then we'll give you a chance to ask.
Yeah.
I have not done that.
I'm curious to hear about that. Yeah.
Okay. So one is a connection to other people. So people that elevated them and encouraged them and focused them. So, it might be if you're a writer, you were in contact with your editor. If you're a consultant, one person had an independent group of consultants that were independent consultants that got together and they would share. For academics, it's often a writing group where you get together and you share your writing. But basically, it gives you, a place to be. If you don't show up to your writing group, somebody's going to wonder and check on you. It gives you others like you who, understand what you're doing. It gives you people to give you feedback, gives you people to give you affirmation, people to give you support. And so for a lot of people, it was their spouse, and their spouse would say, yeah, no, you were built for this. Keep going. And so that's connection to people. So that one makes sense, right?
Does make sense. Some examples you said are just one person, like a mentor or a spouse. But some of them, it seems to be kind of more of a small network of people who give you that security or that kind of village that's built in when you're in academia or in a company. But when you're working on your own, it's not built in anymore. You kind of need to nurture it yourself.
Yeah. Build and nurture it and maintain it. Otherwise, it tends to fall apart. Whereas, I always liken it to, I grew up, there were 6 kids in my family. And so, I never had to think about whether I wanted to maintain a relationship with my brothers and sisters. I just went home to visit my parents and they happened to be there.
A question I have around that is, so there's a clear difference to me between, let's say, a mentor, an editor, someone who's kind of
a boss.
Kind of a boss, but in a different way than in a company. But someone who is kind of pulling you up and, like you said, showing you your value and kind of confirming to you that you're on the right track. But it's different when you say a writing group. It feels more like a group of peers. But then you have a bunch of them that are maybe like-minded, that maybe could be the subject that you work on. Your personality agrees with them, etc. Did you ask of the people you interviewed how they came up with building either of these types of relationships, these more one-on-ones or these more group relationships? Because I don't think it's evident to everyone. And if you're very involved in finding your path and trying to do the right thing, and especially if you're an introvert, for example, it might be tough to even think of, okay, how do I build a small community? How do I find a mentor, someone who kind of can pull me up?
We've continued, a group of us have continued on this research, and we have one paper we're working on right now on the relationships that happen for independent workers. And one of them might be helpful for your introverts, which are parasocial relationships. My advisor was this very scary man, very clear, very direct, very sure of himself about what I should and shouldn't do. And And that was one of the lessons I had to unlearn over my life, was that his was just one opinion. Turns out people think differently about it. But, I would often think, what would Larry do? That's a parasocial relationship. You're not really in the relationship, but you know enough about that person to be guided by, what they think or the advice they would give, or this is an idea that Larry would love. So I feel a sense of affirmation, even though Larry is died, Larry's gone, or, your mentor didn't take the time to invest in you, but you've seen through a talk or two, you've seen a person you really admire, and you think, what would this, that person would love this track I'm on, get the affirmation that way. And we found that people did that.
That's really interesting. And actually someone, I don't recall the exact person, but someone on the show told me, this is my mentor. And it's someone who is not alive anymore, but who wrote books that the person really gets inspiration from. And the person considers this writer a mentor. So I think it does fall into that parasocial.
The second connection that people build beyond people that helped contain their anxieties, etc., was to place where they typically did their work. And I live that. My office is full of tchotchkes that mean something to me, that tell me people are with me, that tell me I've accomplished this or that, that I know what I'm doing, that kind of thing. And people talked about that. A writer said, a novelist, she said, I put up some of my reviews and awards in a place that's visible to me. So when I'm stuck, I say, no, I obviously can do it. Clearly that's not available to brand new PhD students. But, you'll get an email from someone saying something, that could be put up on your wall. But it's not all about affirmation. Sometimes it was about bringing focus. Like one a novelist, other than the one I just talked about, he did all of his writing in a 6 by 8 foot shack out on a property. And he said that space contained his thoughts, so that he could be productive. If the space went any bigger, it didn't work. And so, another guy was an independent consultant. So he's out there fighting for business all the time, trying to get someone to accept him and bring him in. And he said, my office looks like the cockpit of a fighter jet plane, with the technology I have. And you could just imagine this guy who's got to go out and fight in the marketplace to win the business, get the contract. His office kind of reinforces that to him, that you are a man, a warrior, a man of metal, kind of thing. And I don't think it was conscious on his part. I don't think he said, I've got to set my office up that way. But I think it probably served that function. Another she was a script writer, and she said, I do all my raw writing in my bed. Huh. Said, my bed is, I feel cosseted and, sort of secure and warm. And, that's where I do my writing. And then I edit later on the computer. So it's being thoughtful about place and what the place where you typically do your work is doing for you and not doing for you. Like there are many times when I say you just have to take an hour and clean your office, because the messiness of your office is beginning to be reproduced in the messiness in your mind. So there's a lot of different examples. They did it different ways, but it's really attending to place and recognizing place can make a difference. I think if you honor your place and you're thoughtful about how you set up your place, you're honoring you. You're honoring your importance in the world. You're honoring the value of what you're doing, even if nobody yet notices it. My friend my neighbor went off to do ceramics on dark January mornings. Nobody knew. Nobody cared. But she honored it herself, made a difference. So
I really like that idea of honoring, and because one of the dangers, when we talked about identity a few minutes ago, and one of the things that's a danger when you're in this situation of anxiety and trying to reach goals that you don't even know where the goalpost is that you may forget to honor yourself. You may put yourself on the shelf and say, okay, I'm going to focus on this. This is what's important. And I guess that's what leads a lot of young researchers, academics, and people in general, but this is the population we're talking about, to exhaustion, to burnout, etc.
The third one was, I'll go with purpose, and I'll leave the one that I actually think is more important, but I'll leave it to last because there's a funny thing about it. So purpose was, why are you doing what you're doing? Why do you care about the project you care about? And I said there was a long history of this paper getting out. And I'll use myself as an example, and then I'll use some of the gig workers. But part of that history was my student left the field. My attention was being drawn off. But also, I didn't totally know how to do qualitative research, even though I'm pretty experienced in the field. And so I'd get anxious about that whole anxious productivity cycle described me pretty well. But I was able to keep going because the people we talked to had such wisdom. They really had such wisdom about living, working, mattering. And so I wanted their words to be out to people. I wanted to get them out. And if I didn't keep going, they would die with me. And so that would be an example of how a purpose can help with the personalization, the precariousness, the productivity cycle thing. Is if you have a purpose, it helps you to keep going. They also talked about a purpose tells you what kind, like a consultant said, I have a really defined purpose. I didn't earlier, but now I do. And it tells me what work to say no to, what work to say yes to. It tells me, So, I think in academia, some people I know have a real purpose, like people who are doing research around DEIA issues, like they want to make the world better for those people. People who are doing work around sustainability, recognize that the world's, the biosphere is, declining, and they want to get the word out, as fast as they can. So, I think purpose can elevate what you're doing. One guy, he was a consultant to songwriters.
Okay.
That was his gig. And he said, I'm participating in America's song culture. Ronald Reagan says America is a song culture, and I'm playing a part in that. Well, that's like a very elevated rendition of what he's actually doing. But I think that portrayal helped him to keep going, that kind of thing. So connection to purpose can matter.
I think what you mean is not to be confused with the goals that you have, weekly, monthly goals. It's something that's more, 30,000 feet view, right?
It's the why that underlies those goals. Why do you care about getting that achieved in a month or a week? And some of it is getting a job, getting tenure. I don't deny those very pragmatic things. I will note that academia has a very long life after those things. And, you need to have something more than that to sustain you. But I think even on your way to tenure, having a purpose, something bigger, the why beneath all the task goals you have, can really help when times get tough. The fourth, connection. And we call them connections. because we wanted to clearly indicate that the agency is in the hands of the gig worker. Nobody's going to do this for you. You have to make these connections. Your workspace can be ad hoc or it can be intentional, but it's going to depend on you. The fourth one, and I left it for last, not because it's least important, but because I'm frustrated by how we named it. We called it, remember, there's people, place, purpose, and we called it routines.
Oh, you need another P.
We call it practices. Somebody else did later. I saw in a talk and I'm like, darn. But routines, I think, are really super important. Routines are kind of like the warden. One writer said, routines are the warden of accomplishment.
Oh, wow.
That's a beautiful saying. So routines are everything from how you start your day to how you end your day and everything you do in between. After I wrote this paper, I was talking to someone and they said, there's a famous writer and I just can't remember his name, but it was a long time ago, writing like after World War II. And he used to get up in the morning, put on a suit and tie, leave his house, walk around the block, come back to his house, walk up to his attic office and start his workday. So that's a routine that says, I'm no longer in my home life. I'm now in my work life. Another routine might be how you end the day. We have a second article where we took these ideas and tried to apply them directly to academia, and I can give that one, the link for that one. But so we talked to a lot of academics about, well, what routines do you use? And this one person said that she always ends with a Post-it at the end of her day that she's going to attach to her computer. And the Post-it tells her where to start the next day. Because morning self wants to, look at the email and maybe there's a link to Facebook. And so you go over there and then you go to LinkedIn and you da-da-da-da-da. But nighttime self knows that what morning self really wants to do is that. And so she'd write this Post-it, stick it on her computer. And then in the morning, the directive for the next day would be there. So routines might be, like I have a routine I use in my academic work, and these show up in that second article. These aren't so much from the gig workers themselves, but I have two desks in my office. I have the one you can see in this picture, and then over there's a round table. And I go to the round table when I'm doing deep thinking. Okay. And I do it in part because I'm away from all of the technology and the computer and the distraction. I take a pad of paper, I take my water bottle, and I go over, and I often will set a timer and I make myself stay there until that timer goes off. And I'm thinking about the new research directions or the this or that I want to think about, but that is causing me anxiety. And I know it's causing me anxiety because I have thoughts like, I really ought to get that light bulb changed. Has been unworking for, 5 years, but suddenly it seems critical. So that's a routine. So a routine might be how you tackle your job. A routine might be like this morning, I came in and worked for 2 hours before I opened email at all. And, I've got 2 hours of good work in before any distractions came. So it's how you handle that. It's all sorts of different things that you do. And you might have a weekly routine, like where you do certain things on, Mondays and Fridays, different, that kind of thing as well. Mm-hmm. But you're thoughtful about your routines, and your routines support the work you want to get done.
Thank you for listening to this new episode of Season 6 of Beyond the Thesis with Papa PhD. Have a question about this interview? Want to leave a comment about the podcast? Have someone you want to recommend to be interviewed? Go to speakpipe.com/papaphd and leave me a voice note. Just hit the big record button and leave me an up to 90-second message. I listen to all my messages and I consider all of them for feature on future episodes. speakpipe.com/papaphd. Hope to hear from you soon.